Hi, my name is Riley Thompson.
My name is Hannah Pantica.
I'm Kaylin Miller.
I'm Sohana Patel.
And today we're going to be discussing the negative effects of high-stakes education culture through a panel of 5 questions that we'll be discussing in a group. You guys ready?
Yes.
Okay. So our first question is, what do you think the high-stakes environment and pressures have to do with burnout at grade level?
Well, I think that the pressure from a high stakes environment is going to cause stress because you're going to feel like you need to perform well, and like that's a stressful thing. And because stress with school is like longer term, because you're trying to perform well like all year, you're going to be like stressed for a long period of time, and people, especially teenagers in high school, just aren't designed to handle stress for long periods of time, and it can lead to physical and mental problems like migraines, stomach issues, anxiety and depression, and like just feeling stressed for so long is going to lead to burnout, which is a normalized thing because like a lot of schools are participating in a high stakes environment and high stakes education culture, and I feel like people treat it like a normal thing, but it's like pretty serious and harmful, and school should be about like learning and figuring out what you're interested in, and not just like being so stressed all the time that you get to a point where you feel like it's hard to like keep going.
Yeah, and then like on top of that, like because of this high stakes environment, we feel like we need to do all these like extracurricular activities and like hobbies just to, like keep up with everyone else. But then like you're going from like 8-hour school day of like constantly being pushed all day, and then you're going to practice straight after school until like 8 p.m. and then on top of that you're doing homework. So like that like just like amount of activity throughout the school day, like, and then like after school, like that's going to lead to burnout, like, and we're doing it years in a row, like.
Yeah, we have, I think it's like 13 years of it's 13 years of education before we go to college, and then if you go to college you have 4 more, and then a graduate degree would be 3 more on top of that. So I really think that like the constant, especially during the school day, I think that the constant having to like be on point the whole time is it's really a big issue, because I think when we're expected to, I don't know about you guys, but like my parents at work, they can like take breaks if they need to. They're not constantly having to be like listening, paying attention, like all of that stuff. But at school we have to be, because we have lectures and then we're expected to get assignments done by the end of class. So I think it's just really important that we recognize that like burnout, it's a real thing, and it's not caused by just one thing. It's just really the accumulation of all of these problems that we're having.
And I think especially because our school is so academically competitive, I think that like we have such high standards that it's like we get overworked so easily, because we are expected to do a lot more than maybe even other students from other schools, because our peers and everyone around us, we see them doing just as much, so we feel the need to like almost live up to what they're doing.
Yeah, it's like inflation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good point. Like, I think especially at Green Level, we are in such a culture where it's like we kind of feed off of each other, which can be great at times because we have a lot of really successful kids, but at other times it's really dangerous because we start to just be more and more competitive to the point where it's unnecessary, and you're just competing just to compete, and you feel like you're going to fail if you don't beat the person next to you.
Right, and it's undermining what like the purpose of education should be, which is like learning, figuring out what you want to do, and not just like competing with other people. And like some people do think that like rigorous coursework and like competition for students is a good thing because it prepares them for like the real world. But I think that especially at like they're younger, they're not like prepared to handle that level of stress yet, and I just think it's not sustainable to be dealing with like every day for years.
Yeah, just like no one like takes the classes they want to do anymore, or at least especially at our high stakes environment. Just like no one's gonna take like an honors level class if they can take that easy AP, even though you might like that honors level class more, like you want to do it more and it aligns more with your interests. Like it doesn't matter, you're gonna do the easy AP. just so that you can get that credit even if you hate the class. Like, it doesn't matter. Just because we're in this environment where we feel like we need to do all this just so we can have a bright future or whatever.
Yeah. I think, okay, so that leads us, like, perfectly into the next question,
Ooh.
which is, what do you think about, like, the means to an end argument versus a true learning environment when it comes to competitive education at school? So when we say, like, means to an end, we mean taking classes just to take the classes, get the credit, as opposed to taking it to learn. Do you want to say something on that?
Yeah, I mean, just, like, I don't feel like anyone's really learning anymore. Like, we're just trying to get good grades. So whether that means, like, you're cheating on assignments or you're cheating on tests, like, I know personally I would rather do that than fail.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just because we're in this place where we have to succeed and, like...
Yeah, you have to succeed at everything you do. There's no choice otherwise.
You're going to find a way to succeed.
Yeah.
I think it's almost turned into, like, school is not about learning, it's just about making sure you're on top of everything you have, just so you can have, like, not even the best education, but you can, like, say that you're having the best education. And,
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
And, like, you can almost, like, it just so you get into a good college and, like, so you impress and, like, everyone knows that you're like, on top of everything, but it's not actually learning. It's just, like, getting the grades.
Right. Well, and I think it's, like, it's really interesting because if you think about it, like, we're doing all of this, like, okay, trying to get into a college, but once you get in college, what are you going to be doing? Trying to get into the best job. Where's the end point where you, like, actually start doing things that you want to do to learn instead of just doing things to be better than everybody else? That sounds really, like, cynical.
Wow, yeah.
But
True.
when you get into the workforce, you're not going to have any, like, if we keep treating school like this, you're not going to have a well-rounded human to like man the workforce, I guess.
I mean, there's no fulfillment in that.
Yeah.
Like, you're never gonna truly find, like, happiness, I guess. Just because it's just all, like, you're just trying to be better than the next person, and it's just like, where do you do what you want to do? Like,
Yeah. And I think that starts when we're in, like, really middle school, and I mean elementary school isn't all that competitive. You're just
you're just playing along.
You're just playing along. But once you get in middle school, you start thinking about, like, all of these, I don't know, competitive extracurriculars. Like, they start you in National Junior Honor Society when you're in middle school. Like, you can be a part of that. And then you're like, okay, well, if I was in NJHS, I should be in NHS too. Well, no, you actually have to go through a whole other application process for that. And I think that kind of is really, like, it really exemplifies our whole system that we have right now, because nothing, like, people used to go to school to learn because it was enjoyable and they thought it was going to make them a better person and help them to have a better life, but, like, now that is not. It's just kind of like a given, and we kind of take our education for granted, I feel like.
Yeah, and, like, with such, like, a strong focus on, like, just getting ahead and, like, doing the things you need to do to, like, be the top of your class in high school and get into the best college, then, like, get a job that sounds good. Like, there's just not going to be any room for, like, doing things that you're, like, genuinely interested in or, like, genuinely care about.
Yeah.
Would you guys, like, almost say, like, because of the way our schools are now, like, it's just, like, it leads to these mental health problems that you have for, like, your whole life? Like,
I think it definitely
or, like,
it structures it in that
yeah.
way. Yeah. It's definitely, like, I think it leads to, like, anxiety for sure. I mean, I know just being anxious is not classified as anxiety, but I think it can definitely lead to that. I think that there are definitely, like, we will start having fulfillment issues that we never feel like we're doing enough that could lead to, in the end, like, depression. It's really dangerous. I think that's definitely a valid point that you could make.
Yep. And, like, another thing is, like, with such, like, a high-stakes environment, a lot of times students will prioritize, like, schoolwork or studying over their sleep, which, like, can be super unsustainable because getting, like, not enough sleep for a long period of time
Very unhealthy.
is, like, it's super unhealthy. Like, you need to be getting sleep or else you're like way more at risk for a lot of physical issues and then a lot of mental issues also, like anxiety and depression.
I think also just like with high stakes education, it's like even if like your hobby is something else, like maybe art or music, you feel like you have to do something that everyone else is doing, like math or science, and like in the long run, if you think about it, like if that's what you pursue in life and that's not what you wanted to do, that could also lead to like you not feeling as happy and like fulfilled as if you did something that you actually enjoyed.
Yeah, and I think that that's a point that our education system, like, I don't know whose fault, I'm not really sure whose fault it is. I think it was just the product of great inflation and how that happens, but you're definitely right, Son. I think that, like, at Green Level especially, people feel like they need to be so well-rounded that they need to be good at everything, and really that's just not real life. Like, everybody has their individual strengths, but we don't celebrate those enough, and we don't put enough like effort into helping kids use those strengths and like be sufficient in other things, but you don't need to excel in everything because that's not realistic. That's not realistic expectations. That can be really unhealthy to hold yourself to that.
So do you guys think these pressures like come from just like within ourselves, or like who do you think these like pressures are really being enforced by?
I think it's kind of a mix of a bunch of things. I think definitely it comes from students. It's just our peers. We feed off of each other's energy. And it's like, I learned about this in psych, but do you know what I'm talking about? It's like when you're in a group effect, everything gets amplified. Yeah, so I think it's definitely like that. And I think it just kind of grows and grows and grows over time. But there are also like institutional things that different things are valued at different places, but you're like, I know colleges are leaning away from looking at test scores, which I think is a really great step in the right direction, because not everybody, as we know, is a good test taker. Like, I am a decent test taker, but I'm definitely not the strongest, and I know people who are way smarter than me, but are horrible test takers, so I just really don't think it's a good measure. So I think it's good that we're leaning away from that. But yeah, I think it's definitely a mixture of things. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that like a lot of students do have like internal pressure, like they put pressure on themselves, but I think that really comes from like facing external pressure for a lot of years before that. Like, I think naturally most students wouldn't be so like internally like stressed and pressured to perform so well, that like naturally we care more about like just like learning and like doing things that we enjoy. But I think that feeling pressure from parents, from teachers, from other students for so long to just like be the best and do better and get like the best grades just like makes us start putting that pressure on ourselves too.
And I want to say, like, I don't really feel like we face, of course there is some pressure from teachers, but I don't feel like we face like a lot of pressure from teachers. Honestly, like at this point, like I feel like at our school at least, and the teachers that like I've had, like I know like most of the time they care, like they're not like overly stressed about like your grades.
No.
Like they don't care, like
They want you to succeed, but
they
it's
want
not
you to succeed, but they also like I know, or at least Miss Nation a lot is like big on like it's just like temporary, like it's not, anything's not permanent, and like she wants you like to go for what makes you happy.
Yeah.
And like I feel like a lot of teachers are like that, like they're human too, like they went for the whole like education system, and like
believe it or not, they work with a bunch of us, so they know what's going on in our minds.
So I feel like it's like higher than teachers that have just created this whole
higher and lower at the same time, because it's like it's us, but it's also structures above teachers that teachers don't really have control of, you know. It's not their rules.
They can't like change the curriculum, like they can't change the grading,
because I feel like teachers, they like understand, like they have like a curriculum they have to teach, but they try to make it as easy as possible.
They try to make it
because they
approachable,
understand like what we're going through.
Okay. So our next question is, how do you think Green Level students' intense focus on their academic performance limits the exploration of their other interests like hobbies or sports? And do you think that those other interests like sports could cause stress too?
Well, the students' focus on like academic performance really limits. It means that they're using a lot of their time on like homework and studying to maintain like good academic performance and live up to the pressures they're facing. So this like limits the time that they have to pursue their interests and hobbies or like participate in things like sports. And like outside of just the time factor, focusing so intensely on like maintaining good grades and having a good GPA like really just takes a lot of effort and energy also, which I feel like can like lower a student's motivation when they do have free time to like do other things like things like sports. That takes like mental energy, it takes physical energy. Like it may be something you enjoy, but like it still can be hard to like pursue after you've spent so much like energy and time on focusing on school.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. When we're so hyper-focused on our GPA and resume, it's hard to prioritize other things over that, even if it's something that we enjoy. Like, I know, for example, like, I really love to read, and, like, read historical fiction books especially, but when I get into school, I read a ton over the summer, but when I get into school, I just don't have time between, like, sports, between practice, between volunteering, between schoolwork. I really just don't have enough time to do the things that I really enjoy, like reading, just because I'm having to prioritize other things over that. And I think it's really unfortunate that the way our, like, education is structured, that a lot of people are forced to do that.
Yeah, and, like, it's almost like having, like, 2 jobs, like, going to school and then, like, playing a sport. Like,
Yeah.
it really is, like, 2, like, I don't know, part-time jobs, whatever.
I mean, it's kind of 2 full-time jobs,
full-time jobs.
Especially if you carry that out into, like, your college career.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, especially in college. It definitely takes over more. But, like, I know a lot of times, like, I've skipped practice sometimes just because, like, I needed to study for something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it wasn't an option for me to just come home at 9 p.m. and me not have that chance. Or, like, I'm skipping out on other things, like church events and, like, just so that I can study, which is terrible. But I know
things that you enjoy.
Yeah, exactly. Just because, like, I feel like I need to do this. But I've also skipped out a lot in school because of sports, which, I mean, I'm not complaining.
Yeah, it kind of, like, takes that spins it back onto the other question is, like, do you think those other interests cause stress too? Like, I know for me personally, like, I get stressed out by my sport quite a bit, or at least I have historically. Now I'm getting better about it and managing my time and realizing that not all of my validation comes from that. But I think that at times it's definitely stressful. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, with sports, it's like an enjoyable thing for a lot of people, but it's still something that, like, there's still definitely a pressure there to, like, perform well, and to, like, competition, obviously, like, competing with others is, like, a big part of that, and that definitely can put a lot of stress on anyone participating in sport.
Just, like, being the best, and, like, especially if you want to get recruited, like, that's a lot of our stress too, because just, like,
Hannah would know.
Yeah, because, like, you're figuring out in your future, like, I mean, I know where I'm going to college, and, like, I don't know, it's just weird knowing I have, like I have that all planned and figured out, but it's just, like, having that planned and figured out, like, having that set already is, like, it's, like, whoa, like, I'm already going to college, which it's taken away a lot of academic stress, but just because I don't, well, at least, but, I mean, it also can add a lot of stress with just being recruited, just because
you have to maintain
money, with sports, it requires a lot on your GPA and all of this, so there's even more stress on that, but I mean, at least you have your school figured out, but I don't know. It can add to it, definitely.
And I think definitely, like, doing sports while also, like, keeping up with school is, like, another thing that could be stressful because, like, you have to balance both.
Yeah, it's definitely very, very time consuming. It takes one thing that I have learned through trying to balance sports and school is time management. I don't know about you guys, but, like, time management has been one thing that, like, I have gotten pretty darn good at because of trying to balance everything on my plate. Like, when I take one thing off, I'm like, wow, I got this. Like, this is easy.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I'm still pretty terrible at time management. I procrastinate so much, especially when you just have, like, this, like, big workload and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't. After you just get home from practice and you're, like, so tired.
Well, I want to say I feel like that contributes to, like, I know there's, like, stereotypes about, like, teenagers procrastinating from things and just being lazy, but honestly, procrastination isn't, like, about being lazy. It's just, like, when you're so tired and when you're doing so many things all the time.
When you're so burnt out.
Right.
You can't handle it.
You need a break, you need rest, so, like, that adds to procrastination. Like, students will say things for the last minute because they need a break, like, so they're gonna, like, they're not going to be
They're just
able to
gonna
jump
wait,
right into
yeah.
schoolwork, so they're just going to take that break, and that like causes procrastination, which can like be even more unsustainable than if you were to do an assignment right away. But
Yeah.
sometimes it's just like really not like gonna work out. Like you're not gonna be able to get home from a long
Yeah.
school day, a practice, and then go straight into doing like a bunch of homework.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. And like for me personally, this, I don't know if this is like okay or if this is bad. I really don't know, but like I hate exams and I hate studying for exams so much that I have the mentality of, okay, if I can get my A high enough in this class that I can fail the exam and still have an A, then that's the goal. That's what I try to do in all of my classes.
Yeah.
Like, chem, not working out so good right now, but it's okay. We'll figure it out. Maybe I'll have to study for that exam. But, like, generally, I try to, like...
Not have that stress of the exam. I hate the stress
having
of the
that
exam.
stress so much. Because I am scared that I'm going to freeze on a test, especially, like, I'm not a strong math student, so especially in math, I'm like, if I can just do well in this class during the year, I don't need to stress about the exam, and I'll still keep an A on my GPA, because I'm worried about my GPA and not actually knowing the content.
Yeah.
Right. It's like one test becomes such a big thing, because if it's like the final that's going to determine if you get an A or not,
Yeah.
then you're going to be like so stressed over that one thing. You're going to be like, okay, if I don't do good enough
Yeah.
on this, then I'm not going to get an A in this class, then my GPA is not going to be high enough, then
Yeah.
I won't get into the college I want to get on. Like, it just builds like
Yeah.
so much.
That's another thing, is I feel like we put so much pressure on each little individual thing. Like, I mean, many a time, especially in my, like, AP Gov class last year, there were kids who were like, oh, if I fail this test, I'm not getting into college. Which is crazy that we think that way.
And you're a sophomore. Like, you're
I
literally,
know,
like, 15.
it's a sophomore. You're 15. You have 3 years until you have to worry about college. And I think it's just crazy. And I'm not, like, blaming these kids at all, because it's really just institutional. Like, it's what we are conditioned to think because of how consequential we think every single thing is. It's crazy.
I know. I have a friend that's struggling a lot, and, like, calc. AP
Yeah.
Calc. And she's like, I know, like, there's been, like, many times where she's like, well, what's the point? Like, I'm gonna get, like, if I get, like, a C in this class, it's gonna drop my GPA so much, and then, like, I'm not getting to a good college, and then it's like, what's even the point of all this? Like, it's crazy. Like, it's just, like, at least down such a bad rabbit hole, and it's like, then you don't get a good job, you don't go to a good college, and it's like, everything's just so stressful.
It is. And that's like the best word you can use to describe it, is stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That kind of like goes to our next one.
Yes.
In what ways might high stakes education inadvertently, I don't think I said that right,
you
encourage
didn't.
unhealthy stress coping mechanisms in grade level students? What may those unhealthy habits look like?
Okay, so, I think that, like, one thing that we can talk about is that kids' brains are not developed until 25, and we're constantly, like, fed that piece of information. Like, I know my parents tell me, like, well, you shouldn't make any big decisions, like, you shouldn't go get a tattoo until you're 25 because your brain's not fully developed, so you don't know if you're really gonna like that after you're a quote-unquote full adult. But I think that, like, because our brains are not fully developed until we're the age 25, like, we are pushed to handle these pressures that are at the same level as adults are handling. Maybe not the same scale, but definitely, like, they affect us very similarly. But we don't have the coping mechanisms wired biologically in our brain yet to be able to help us to deal with those things.
Yeah.
So I think that pushes us into some very unhealthy coping mechanisms. Like, I mean, it sounds dramatic, but, like, obviously you have mental health disorders, you have your anxiety and depression are two huge ones. And I think, like, self-harm is another big one. And harmful behavior is not even, like, you know, physical self-harm, but just engaging in risky, like, and harmful behaviors is definitely a huge thing that I see a lot of, like, my peers doing.
And I think that like that ties back into, like, just burnouts. Like, if you, like, get to the point where, like, you feel like you're, like, to the point you don't, like, even know, or, like, you're overworked to the point where, like, it's just, like, you have no other way of coping because that's, like, the only thing that
You don't know what else to do.
Yeah, you don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like for, like, a lot of, like, adults and, like, people, like, don't really understand like, some of these mechanisms. Like, they're like, they would be like, why are you, like, hurting yourself because you're stressed? Like, it doesn't make sense to them. But I think, like, for students, it's just, like, they can't, like, properly, like, process all the, like, stress in their body and their brain. So if, like, that's going to give them, like, a momentary, like, relief from that stress, like, it's the best option for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you guys want to move on to the last question?
Sure.
Okay. So the last question is, what are some potential solutions or alternative actions that Green Level or other schools can take to decrease negative effects associated with high-stakes education culture? Do you want to start on this one, Caitlin?
Yep. Okay. So I think that there are a lot of, like, potential, like, good solutions that aren't really looked at. I think that one big source of stress, like we talked about for students, is, like, big, like, tests, like the stress that comes with that. And before that, like, test taking, it physically causes, like, a cortisol spike, which is, like, the stress hormone before, like, taking a test, which causes a lot of stress and anxiety. So it's really just not, like, a sustainable thing. So, like, there are potential options. One thing, like, to replace this, one thing would be, like, portfolio assessments, which would be, like, a student could build a, like, portfolio of, like, assignments and, like, activities throughout, like, their year or their semester in a class to show how they're, like, growing in a subject over time. They can also engage in more, like, project-based learning, so they can, like, demonstrate the stuff they're, like, actually learning in, like, real world situations, not just, like,
not
circling answers on a paper. Yeah. And this, like, really lowers their stress, but it also makes it more, like, realistic and practical for them. And then moving outside of tests, I'd say just, like, really focusing more on, like, mindfulness and things that, like, promote well-being in the classroom, and not just being so focused on, like, achievement and competition all the time. So just, like, little things like implementing time for, like, breathing exercises, or even putting things in classes, like in a language class having, like, time for gratitude journaling, or in a physical education class having something like yoga, where a student can just, like, slow down, emotionally regulate, like, really be, like, focused on their well-being and not their achievements.
Yeah, I think I want to circle back on the point you said about test taking and project-based learning. I did have a teacher, it was the first AP class that I ever took, AP World History, and I had a teacher who, she was, like, very, very into project-based learning, and it was super, super helpful for me because we took tests, but the tests were not as consequential, I don't feel like, as the projects were. The projects were definitely, like, had a heavier weight on our grade than the tests did. And I think that's super helpful because as opposed to having to sit down one day and, like, really, like, lock in and focus on one test and, like Kaylin said, circling answers on a piece of paper, we had a cumulative, like, couple days to work on this project in class with people, and we could collaborate, which I think is another thing. Like, increasing collaboration in classrooms would be a huge deal because that inherently would help the competition to go down. Because if we're forced to work with the people, not forced sounds negative, but if we have an inclination to work with the people that we used to be competitive with, then we're going to want them to succeed too, because their success means our success and their failure means our failure. So it's really going to decrease that competition. I think it would be super healthy to just kind of encourage teachers to use those collaboration methods as much as they possibly can, even though for whatever reason it's historically seen as cheating. I don't understand it. I mean, if you can make yourself better by working with other people, I think that's a great tool to use.
Right, like, just, like, there's so many, like, other things outside of just the learning that you can grow from that, like communication skills, social skills, like, just, having to deal and work with other people, like, leadership skills.
For sure. I think leadership is a huge thing. I mean, everybody's going to need leadership skills at some point, and we are really not taught that in school. Colleges do a good job of placing value on leadership. I think that's a good thing that, like, that at least incentivizes us to pursue leadership opportunities, but I think that we don't learn enough about, okay, how can I be a good and effective leader? We're just kind of left to be like, oh, you need to figure this one out for yourself. And yes, there are some things that we need to, you know, you can only learn by doing it, but at the same time, I think a little bit of education on that would definitely help.
Also, I think just, like, with the project, more project-based, like, teenagers like to be in control. And,
Yep.
like, I know, like, with me, like, tests, like, I get so stressed about them just
feel
because, like,
out of control.
you don't know what's going to happen on the test. You don't know if it's going to be easy or hard. Like, it just leads to this uncertainty, which, again, leads to anxiety and stress.
Yep.
But with projects, like, you have control. You have control over what you're doing. You have control over just...
You know what you're doing.
Yeah,
You're
you
not-
know
there's
what
no
you're doing.
surprises. Yeah.
It's not just, like, a blind reaction. Like,
Yeah.
And I think that's just... I know I get stressed a lot about tests, but...
Yeah,
So that
for
would just
sure.
help a lot. Just not having them have such a big impact.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Sorry. And I think also with like collaboration, not even just like projects, but like something that we did in our A push classes, we do like group tests. And like I know that's not like feasible for like every class, but like even if I study for the test, it takes a lot of anxiety off of me because it's not like I'm the only one who's like getting
Yeah.
the grade. And I think that's also like another option that's like that should be thought about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and I think that's very like applicable to the real world too.
Yeah.
Group tests are, because if you think about it, people are like, oh, you're not gonna have other people's help in the real world, but you will.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have other, like when you're in the workforce, you have a lot of tools at your disposal that teenagers do not have when they're taking tests.
Right.
Once you finish your education and you're in the workforce, you have Google, you have AI, you have other people around you, you have your bosses, your superiors, you have mentors, you have all of these people and tools that you can use to help you that are not like given to us when we're taking tests, which I really like. It doesn't resemble what your real world experience is going to be, I don't feel like. Do you guys have any ideas about, like, okay, at a larger scale, what do we think, like, something that, I don't know, school board people or, like, colleges could help do to fix this issue?
I think just like, I mean, I'm not like an expert on like what any like policies or
Yeah.
anything right now, so I mean, this is kind of broad, but I feel like just like really like taking more care of looking at curriculums and making sure that they're like, I think rigor is good, but making sure that they're like sustainable and realistic
Yeah.
and not going to be adding like too much unnecessary stress on students. Just like really like focusing on like
Yeah, I think what you said about the rigor is really good, and I think that I think we should definitely like make sure that you're creating a well-rounded student not only in their academics, because like we said before, you don't need to be good at everything, but also encouraging kids, incentivizing kids to have life experiences. And I think that that's one thing that college applications, like, we're leaning towards that. I think we're going in a great direction where they're like, they call it, I think it's like holistic is what they call it. Like it's a holistic application process. So they look at everything from your GPA to like your extracurriculars, your volunteer hours, your leadership, that sort of stuff. I think that's great because in the end, those life experiences are what's going to make you a better person and a more successful person, and not just like sitting in the classroom for 8 hours a day.
Yeah, and I think we just need like a social shift too, like larger scale. Like I think people just need to be talking about the future for students specifically, like not about like just not talking so much about like getting good grades and getting into college and stuff, but like really focusing on more on just like really encouraging people to like pursue what they're interested in and what they care about, because I feel
For
like
sure.
not enough like people do that.
Yeah. Honestly, this might be a little controversial, but I think just getting rid of AP classes.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like this whole nother like...
It would be
like,
really hard to do, but...
It would be really hard to do, but like just the whole thing that like it adds onto your GPA, and like it's just like viewed as this like holy grail of a class. But like if you get rid of that, then like I think keep the academic classes just for
Yeah.
people that struggle with a certain subject
yeah,
that you need
because
to.
we all have different levels of understanding.
Yeah. But I think if you give the AP classes, then it's like people are doing what they want to do, and not just the easy AP that you want to do, or
Yeah.
just the AP that everyone's doing, but
Yeah.
just like the class that you want to do, because they're all weighted the same then,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just having this class that like is you think is weighted so much more and is going to help your GPA, but in reality like you get a bad grade in the
Yeah.
class and then your GPA lowers. And
Yeah.
I know my mom back in the day, like they like had like one AP class in their school.
Yeah, my dad took 2
Yeah,
AP classes in high school.
which is crazy. Like you say that now,
Yeah.
and it's like you take 2 in a semester.
And he's a PhD graduate from Carolina. Like, he's doing fine. Both
Yeah,
my parents
I know.
are
My
doing
mom
fine.
went to Berkeley, and she
Yeah.
did. I
Yeah.
don't even know 0 APs.
Yeah,
So
literally.
like,
Okay. Thanks for listening.
thank you guys.